Okay, so let's get into it. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of material, and it's all about the very roots of international law.
hmm
Now, you might hear international law, your mind immediately jumps to, treaties, the UN, that sort of thing,
Right.
but we're going much, much deeper.
We really are. We're tracing the evolution of the idea itself, how it went from, say, a philosophical or even a religious concept to the codified system we have today.
Exactly. And our goal here isn't just to list facts, it's to pull out the intellectual journey behind it.
Right. And our sources are pretty clear on this. For anyone who really wants to understand this topic, you don't need to memorize every single definition word for word,
No,
but you do need to know the major thinkers, the jurists, and the huge philosophical shifts they brought to the table.
absolutely. It's all about the progression of thought. So for this deep dive, we've zeroed in on three foundational pillars, the three names you really have to know.
Hugo Grotius, Jeremy Bentham, and LFL Oppenheim.
These are the guys. They're basically the architects of this whole field.
Each one represents a massive leap forward in thinking. So, where should we start?
Let's start at the beginning. The man everyone calls the father of modern international law, Hugo Grotius.
To really get Grotius, you have to picture the time he was living in. We're talking the 16th and 17th
That's
centuries.
sheer chaos.
Free chaos. Europe was just tearing itself apart politically, religiously. The Reformation had happened. The 30 Years' War was either starting or raging. It was a brutal, brutal time.
So if you're a ruler back then, what's stopping you from doing whatever you want to another kingdom? I mean, if everyone's claiming divine right, where do the rules come from?
Well, that's the thing. The main legal idea was something called natural law, but it was deeply theological. The law was seen as being handed down by a deity.
Okay.
So if your God is different from my God, the whole basis for law gets, well, it gets very shaky.
And that's where Grotius comes in. He's not a priest or a theologian. He's a jurist, a statesman.
Exactly. And he sees all this religious fracturing and he realizes, look, we desperately need some kind of new common ground, legally speaking.
So what was his big idea, his revolutionary shift?
Well, he argued that natural law did not actually depend on a divine mandate.
Wait, really? So he was basically decoupling law from God.
In a way, yes. He believed that natural law comes from an essential universal reason that's common to all people.
Okay, let's unpack that. That sounds radical for the time.
It was.
He's saying, look, we don't need to agree on God. We just need to agree that we're all reasonable human beings who'd rather not kill each other.
That's the core of it. Law is grounded in our shared humanity, in our reason. And he lays this all out in his massive book, De Jure Belli Ac Pacis.
Which is on the law of war and peace.
Right. He wasn't just philosophizing. He was writing a practical rule book for how to survive in this fragmented, war-torn world.
And because he grounds law in human reason, he suddenly gives legitimacy to things like actual practices, customs, and treaties.
Yes. The things nations were already doing. He's saying what we agree to, what we practice, that is the law. That's really the birth of the modern concept.
It also sounds like he was very forward-looking.
He was.
Yeah?
He believed in what's called progressive law. He wasn't just interested in the law as it is, but in the law as it ought to be. The system should always be improving.
So he gives us two core principles, then, for this new system.
The first one is about the source of the law. Grotius says, look, there's no global king or sovereign to impose rules on us.
Right.
So the law has to be derived from principles that we, the people, and our states create through demand, practice, and these written agreements or treaties. It's consensual.
And the second principle is probably the most important concept in all of international law.
Oh, absolutely. Pacta sunt servanda.
Promises must be kept.
Promises must be kept. I mean, think about it. In your own country, if you break a contract, the courts or the police can force you to comply.
Sure.
Internationally, there's no world police force. There's an absence of a single sovereign.
So if nations don't keep their word, the entire system it collapses.
It completely collapses. It relies on trust. Your promise, your treaty, becomes the highest obligation.
And what's amazing, and the sources really highlight this, is the timing. He came up with all of this before the Westphalian Treaties of 1648.
Yeah, which is incredible. Those treaties are what officially established the idea of state sovereignty, that all these nations are independent and equal.
So Grotius was building the intellectual framework for how these new sovereign states should interact before they were even, fully a thing.
He was way ahead of the curve. He built the infrastructure for the modern state system.
Okay, so Grotius gives us the concept, philosophy of reason, and the golden rule. keep your promises,
Right, but he didn't give it the name we use today.
and called it Jus Gentium, the law of nations.
Mm-hmm. For the modern term, we have to jump forward in time quite a bit to a different thinker entirely.
To Jeremy Bentham. Now, he's a name most people know for utilitarianism, but he plays a key role here.
A very specific but very important one.
He's the one who actually coined the term international law.
In the year 1780, and this isn't just a piece of trivia, it's a really significant shift.
Why is that?
Well, the old term, Jus Gentium, law of nations, was a bit ambiguous. It could sometimes mean the laws that governed individuals within a state as well.
Ah, okay. So Bentham, being a legal reformer, wanted more precision.
He wanted absolute clarity. He was all about legal positivism, the idea that law is something clear, written down, and enacted. He needed a term that said, these are the rules between nations, international.
To separate it from national or municipal law.
Exactly. He was drawing a sharp line. His contribution wasn't just a word. It was about making the field itself more systematic.
And he didn't stop there, did he?
No, a few years later, in 1789, he uses the term international relations in one of his books. He's literally carving out this whole field of study as its own discipline.
I think for anyone listening, that's such a clean way to remember it. Grotius gives us the substance, the big idea.
Right.
And Bentham gives us the structure and the name on the door.
Perfectly put. Which brings us to the next logical step. Now that the field has a concept and a name, it needs a formal definition.
And for that, we turn to LFL Oppenheim.
Oppenheim provides the first really comprehensive definition in 1904. And again, like with Grotius, the date is so important.
Right, 1904. What does that tell us?
It's the peak of European empire. It's a moment of, well, a kind of fragile stability. And most importantly, it's before the World Wars completely shattered that old order.
So his definition is going to reflect that specific Eurocentric worldview.
It absolutely does. So here's his definition. He says, international law is the body of customary laws and conventional rules which are considered binding by civilized states in their intercourse with each other.
Okay, let's break that down. The sources of law he mentions, customary and conventional. What's the difference?
Conventional rules are the easy part. Those are written treaties, conventions, agreements. They're explicit.
Got it.
Customary laws are. They're different. They are unwritten rules that come from the general and consistent practice of states over time. It's stuff that nations do because they feel legally required to. It becomes an accepted practice.
So conventional law is the contract you sign. Customary law is the handshake deal that everyone has honored for 100 years.
That's a great way to put it. But now we get to the really controversial part of his definition.
The phrase civilized states, that immediately jumps out. In 1904, who is he talking about?
He is, for the most part, talking about the European countries and states that came from them, like the United States. He was basically creating a club, and only certain nations were invited.
Wow. So it's not just a definition, it's a gatekeeping mechanism.
Absolutely. It reflects the power structure of the time. The idea was that only these so-called civilized states could create and be bound by international law.
Which obviously was heavily criticized.
Immediately. Because think about who that definition leaves out.
Well, most of the world, for one. But also, it leaves out other kinds of actors.
Exactly. Oppenheim's 1904 model is completely state-centric. It totally neglects individuals, it neglects organizations, it neglects companies.
So in his view, a person couldn't have rights under international law.
A person was an object of international law, not a subject. A huge difference. And it's unthinkable today when you consider the role of, say, the Red Cross or huge multinational corporations.
So Oppenheim codifies the system, but for a very small, exclusive club, and he creates limitations that the rest of the 20th century would have to spend decades fixing.
That's the story, exactly. And for a while, other definitions just followed his lead. Brierley, another jurist, uses almost the same language. It remained a state-to-state system for a long time.
But that old model just couldn't hold. I mean, once global trade explodes, once human rights becomes a central issue, the definition has to expand.
It had to. Reality forced it to change. And that brings us to the more modern definitions our sources cover.
So what does the contemporary definition look like? How has the scope changed?
It's a massive expansion.
Yeah.
Today, international law is defined as a system that governs how nations interact with each other, yes, but also how they connect with the citizens of other nations and the businesses of other nations.
And that is the crucial shift. The individual, the very person whose reason Grotius based the whole system on, is now back in the picture.
Firmly back in the picture. International law isn't just for diplomats anymore. It's about your online purchases, your human rights, your international travel.
So if we trace that arc, it's an incredible intellectual journey.
It really is. You go from Grotius grounding law in universal reason to stop wars, to Bentham giving it a formal name, to Oppenheim codifying it for a small club of states.
And now, finally, to a system that actually tries to manage our complex globalized world.
Which you could argue is much closer to what Grotius originally envisioned, a law rooted in our shared human reality.
So the big takeaway here really is that international law isn't some static ancient text. It's a living, breathing conversation that's constantly changing.
That's it. Understanding that evolution, from a philosophy to a code, that's the essential knowledge we wanted to get across today.
A perfect summary. Now, we've spent this entire deep dive talking about public international law. You know, the big stuff. War, peace, treaties, relations between states.
Right. The law that governs sovereigns.
But our sources hinted at this whole other universe of rules, one that affects you every day. Private international law.
A vital distinction.
So if public law is about state borders and treaties, what happens when you cross a border? If you're traveling or working or you buy something from a company overseas and there's a dispute, whose laws apply? If you marry someone from another country, which country's marriage laws are valid? What are the rules that settle disputes between private citizens of different nations? It's a whole other world of law.
It is indeed.
And it's something for you to mull over or maybe explore on your own.
A fantastic, practical question to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious.